Jocelyn is a senior here at DHS. She has been involved in the marching band and indoor percussion program throughout her high school career. She is also a member of the National Honor Society, the student newspaper The Spectrum, the Fishing Club, and will be one of the co-hosts for this year's Mr. Dartmouth competition in March. Jocelyn has a passion for public speaking and enjoyed doing a TEDx talk last year, and we're so happy that she's joining us again. She wanted to present again, but this time she will be presenting about a topic she researched one day when she was wondering, what generation am I? And what does it mean? Please welcome Jocelyn Jerome as she presents Generation Z.
So today I'm going to be talking about Generation Z and answering one of the biggest questions our generation faces and other generations do as well. No, sorry, not this one. Okay, well, while I'm here, let me just take a moment to say that it's not, because I've done thorough research on this. If you look up the definition of soup, you will find that it's a liquid dish, typically made by boiling meat, fish, or vegetables in stock or water. And then I looked up the definition of cereal and came up with a grain used for food, such as wheat, oats, and corn. Now, this didn't make sense to me because it's telling me that this is cereal. But that's not cereal to me. When you say, I'm going to the store to pick up cereal, you're talking about this cereal. But then if your friend said, hey, what did you have for breakfast this morning? You're talking about this cereal, which is cereal and milk. But that cereal and milk is actually made out of cereal. So my mind is racing, and my world is truthfully falling apart. I don't know what to believe in anymore. And then I realized the simple solution to the answer. There was a second definition under cereal, which was a breakfast food made from roasted grain typically eaten with milk. And there's your answer, eaten with milk versus in stock or water. That's that debate ended there. Now for my real TED Talk. So the real question I'm going to be answering is, what generation am I? And let's start by breaking down what a generation is. So a generation is a group of people all born approximately at the same time. And the word generation gets thrown around in many other terms. For example, you have generations of family. When you go to a family event, you may say there were 3 generations of your family together. You and your siblings is one generation, your mother and their siblings is one generation, and your grandmother and their siblings is another generation. Then you also have the term first generation. You have first-generation Americans, which have people who are immigrants, have parents, have a kid in their country. Those are the first-generation kids. Then you also have first-generation college students. This isn't the generation we're focusing on today. We're more so focused on the generations by ages and the groups they were born. Now, although you may see some conflicting information online, I'm going to be going based off of this information, because some people argue Generation Z didn't start until 2004, but we're going to be focusing on the 1996 version. And on the side, you can see that they're the names of the generations along with the ages they'll be at the end of the year. So let's talk about how a generation gets its name. Well, first things first is significant historical events that happen either at the birth of a generation or when the generation is entering adulthood. And then, of course, marketing companies play a big part in this. I'll explain more on that later. So let's just quickly run through the generations. The first 2 not-so-well-defined generations are the Lost Generation and the GI Generation. Lost Generation were those people who were in their adulthood at the end of World War I. They were lost in a spiritual sense, as in they didn't know what to do now that war was over. Then you have the GI Generation. GI, of course, being a term for government-issued. This was a nickname given to soldiers. These are the people who were fighting in World War II. After them came the Silent Generation. These are the people in their adulthood who were part of the quote-unquote silent majority who elected Richard Nixon. And they were also silent because this was the time of the Red Scare. No one wanted to stand out and seem different for fear of being called a communist. Then came the baby boomers. You see, soldiers were returning back home from war and were being reunited with their loved ones, having marriages, and love was in the air. And people were having lots and lots of babies. Of course, I was going to say babies. Then after that came Generation X. If you're wondering for the age group on this one, basically think the cast of Friends. This name got coined from a book called Generation X by Douglas Coupland, which depicted different people of society as different characters. It explored a yuppie teen versus a global teen. And then came the era of lazy generation naming. This is Generation Y, more so well known as the Millennials. They were known as the Millennials because they were entering adulthood at the turn of the millennia, that is, 2000. And here's where the confusion starts, because I'm not part of Generation Y, but I well know that that's the cast of Boy Meets World. And those things that say 90s kids only, I also understand those, but I'm not part of Generation Y. I'm part of Generation Z. And one of the major differences between Generation Z and Generation Y is a matter that we're called the technology natives. Because unlike Generation Y, we weren't learning to adapt to technology in first grade or so forth. We've had it since we were young. And the people who are also in our generation still have the same experience. And all of this is really cool to know, but who cares, or why should I care? And, well, there's two words, marketing companies. They care about generations for many reasons. Mainly this, and this. Oh, and of course, don't forget this. See, generations help markets determine a group of people who they want to appeal to. By finding out people who all are the same age and have the same interests, they can figure out who their target demographic is. For example, let's talk about iPhones. It's predicted that 81% of Gen Z members say that their next phone will be an iPhone. And Apple has become one of those companies that is a trusted name, and it has a loyal market of people. So Apple, using this information, can easily say, hey, let's spike up the prices another $100. People are still going to buy. So out of all the generations to talk about, why do I want to talk about Gen Z? Well, there are mainly three reasons. First of all, that's us, exclusion of teachers. I'm sorry, you don't fit the age group. There's also overwhelming resources available about Gen Z. And although you may be saying, well, aren't there resources about every generation if marketing companies care so much? Well, more so Gen Z than any other. And that's because of this. Gen Z is going to become the biggest generation, making up 32% of the world's population. Now, although Gen Y is only behind by 31.5%, keep in mind that extra 0.5% we have is of 7.7 billion people. So I'd say that's still a fair amount of numbers. So what does this mean to you? It means that markets are going to start appealing to us. As we all start to enter the workforce and start to become more consumers, the market's going to have things that appeal to us, things that we want to buy so that they can make money. It also means our political impact is going to increase hugely because we're going to be turning 18 and be able to vote and also be able to run for office eventually. Then, of course, our problems are going to become society's problems. If you're like me and looking at college and thinking that college debt is a hopeless situation, it may not be, because you see, when we're such a big generation, lots of people are going to have the same problems, which means lots of people are going to search for a solution. And then, of course, society will face new problems. And though it seems like these last two problems are related, they are kind of, but they're very different. Let me explain. With our generation consistently having technology around us since middle school, if not earlier, we have arthritis developing in our wrists and our knuckles. And this is a different problem that hasn't been solved before. We also have phone separation anxiety. Other generations never had to get nervous when they didn't have their cell phone because they didn't have a cell phone. This is why students get twitchy when their teachers try to take away their phones. And then, of course, we have our reliability on online resources. It's not very often that teachers require us to get sources from a hardcover book, more so online. And articles like The Onion, although most of us know it's a satirical article, some people may not know what's the difference between satire and truth. And some people may put out misleading truths. This leads to fake facts and fake news. If I were to ask you, hey, you want to go get a tattoo tomorrow? I'm paying. I bet most of you would put in a little, if not a lot of thought in what you want to do. Because you see, your employers can see stuff like this. You don't want them to think that you don't know how the English language works, or of course, that you underestimate the Patriots. So, believe it or not, we already all have some tattoos that our employers can see, and that's our social media accounts. Even when your social media accounts claim to disappear within 24 hours, or if you think you delete them and you're fine, your information can still be tracked. This trackable information is called your digital footprint. Digital footprint is exactly that, the amount of information someone can track about you based off of your online activity. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because our generation's digital footprint is going to impact us much bigger than any other generation's has. You see, if our parents post something on Facebook, it would have to be really bad, like something anti-Semitic or racist, in order for them to lose their jobs. But with us, even the slightly dirtiest digital footprint will lead to us not even getting an interview for a job. So our generation is truly special in the fact that technology has been around us so much. It means that we have so much more information available to us, and it makes us different from other generations. And it's not really uncommon for older people to say, well, I survived back in the day without technology, why can't you? And they try to belittle us for using our information. Now, although I agree that technological dependency is not good, I don't think we should be shamed for using the resources available to us. A comedian, Dave Chappelle, once said, "Modern problems require modern solutions." And although this became a very big joke on the internet, it still stands true. Just because you survived back in the day without technology doesn't mean that I should if I can use my technology to help me become better. And you see, another thing that's truly great about our generation is that the changing of technology, we've known it since we were young. Steve Jobs once said, "Innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not as a threat." And our generation has this ability much larger than any other generation. We grew up with change as a neighborhood friend, not as some type of enemy. We're used to it and trying to find better solutions, find cures for diseases, and find many